One of Netflix's newest binge-worthy shows gripping fans around the world. The OA is a psychological sci-fi kidnapping thriller mystery all rolled into one. It's about a blind woman who vanishes and then returns home 7 years later with her sight restored. Here's a peek.
Can I ask you something?
I'm sorry, I'm late. I have to go.
Did you always play that well? Or did something happen to you? It did, didn't it? Something happened to you, and then you could play transcendently like that. I'm sorry. Did you have an NDE?
I don't know what that is.
A near-death experience. Did you die and come back to life?
Ooh, Brit Marling is the star of the OA and is one of the series' co-creators and writers. I love this, the fact that you write, you direct, and you act in this film. First off, where did you get this idea from?
Well, It's All About Monglage and I co-created it together. We met in college and we've been making stuff for a long time now. And we were interested in making a mind bender, a long format mind bender. And we were studying near-death experiences, and that seemed like rich territory for setting a sci-fi thriller in.
I'm just so fascinated by this character, Prairie. She's so complex. Like, how did you create this character?
You know, I'm not sure entirely where characters come from, but I think part of it was the idea of studying a trauma survivor. She's a girl who has a very intense experience. And we wanted to do a trauma survivor that wasn't passive, but active in her recovering. And she becomes a storyteller in order to heal herself from this experience she has.
It's almost like a coping mechanism for her?
I think on some level. And also I think storytelling creates a community around her, and she ends up healing the people she comes in contact with as well.
The last scene of the series, of season 1, was pretty powerful. I mean, there's this, it's like this sci-fi episode, and then it has a school shooting, and then there was this interpretive dance. Explain this, like, what was going on here?
Well, the movements, there are these movements that are the sort of heartbeat or center of the show, and they were always a part of the story. I think the idea was, you know, getting an audience invested in something that seemed impossible or otherworldly, and then asking them to take a leap of faith along with these teenage boys and their algebra teacher at the end.
It's just fascinating. I want to ask you, though, what was your sort of overall purpose in creating the OA? Was there something that you hope to achieve with this series?
I think, if anything, to talk about the power of storytelling and the power of faith and believing in something other or outside of yourself, and in community coming together.
You don't hear a lot about that, really.
Not often these days, but we probably should talk more about it.
You know, I'm curious because this wasn't really a series that Netflix put a lot of publicity into. That's why I find your series so fascinating, because it's got this cult following. How did that happen?
You know, I think that the audience is really well educated in story at this point. We all consume so much content. And I think they wanted something different and unusual and challenging. And I think sometimes Hollywood tends to underestimate the audience and what they want. And I think Netflix is a company that's taking really big risks on innovative storytelling and I think reaping the rewards of that.
It's so fascinating for me to see a woman who can write and direct and act and play all these different roles, and such a powerful way of telling a story. How did you get into this?
Well, I came out to Hollywood and I wanted to act, and it was sort of a left turn because I had studied economics and had planned to go work at a bank, and so...
You studied economics?
Yes, which was, so it was a divergent. And so I think it was, when I first started auditioning for things, I was really disappointed by the parts for women, and I kept thinking, if I had an 8-year-old daughter who was going to watch this movie at some point, would she be proud of her mother and that representation of a woman? And usually the answer is no. So then I thought, if I want to do this, I better figure out how to write stories that seem more compelling to me on behalf of women. So
it's really fascinating. So many twists and turns, and so deep and so complex and so rich. I want to ask you, though, can you give us a little preview into season 2?
I wish that I could. The truth is, you know, Zal and I thought about everything up front. One of the worst things about a mind bender is if you get to the very end of it, many seasons out potentially, and it fails to make that final leap or really be a satisfying, you know, end to the mystery. So we did all that plotting up front. As to whether or not we get there, that's out of our hands. But we hope to continue telling it.
What's next for you? What would you like to do in addition to OA?
I mean, at this point, I'd love to just have a proper adventure, you know, like maybe travel somewhere, study the coral reefs before they disappear, you know, something different, a palate cleanser, maybe.
Love that.
Yeah.
Brit Marling, so great to meet you and
Nice
have
to
you
meet
here.
you too.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Cult following, OA, Netflix. Can't wait to watch. Thank you.